everyone, and welcome to The Fields. I'd like to thank our sponsor this episode, Elitist Urban Agriculture. Elitist Urban Agriculture is a luxury cannabis brand founded in St. Louis, Missouri. Their primary focus, create 5 diamond-rated genetics through selective breeding. Offering the state of Missouri and beyond a unique cannabis experience people will definitely be excited for. They take pride in the fact that they are the first African-American cannabis breeders from St. Louis to release a commercial strain. They feel honored to represent the Midwest cannabis region. Next time you're at your favorite dispensary, ask for their strain, Melts. Follow them on Instagram at elitist_brand. My guest today is Joe Kelly, lab manager for VIBE Cannabis here in St. Louis. Joe, thank you so much for being on The Fields, man. Really appreciate it. All right, let's dive into it. Where and when did you get your start in the cannabis industry?
So I got my start in the cannabis industry in southern Colorado, Pueblo to be exact, in 2017. I came on there. I was running the extraction lab as well as partially managing a sales team. We had 5 salespeople spread across the state of Colorado. We were trying to get our product out there. Once I stepped away from the sales team, I went full-time in the lab and moved on to take over all the physical forms of extraction. I did have a manager above me who took care of most of the paperwork and things like that, but I did all the physical extraction, whether it was distillation or hydrocarbon extraction or anything like that. We even delved into a little bit of solventless.
What kind of experience do you have to have prior to getting the job as an extractor in a lab?
So I would say a lot of it is, about knowing the right people. So you have to have a good group of people around you that are, willing to participate and put 100% of the effort, just as much as you are, to make a business, successful. You can't do it all by yourself. It's just not possible. You really need a good team of people around you to bring it to fruition. Thankfully, I had that team, and I think that was a major contributing factor as to why I'm where I am today.
And you spent how many years in Colorado?
5.
5 years. So Colorado's had a 10-year head start on the industry as a whole, given they were one of the first states to legalize for adult use. Now that you are here in Missouri, what kind of innovations from Colorado are you importing to our state?
Well, I learned a lot of the basics in Colorado, but I will say I spent almost a year at Trulieve in Florida, and they're one of the largest multi-state operators in the nation. I would say I learned a lot of my production skills from there. We had very high expectations, and I had a really strong and dedicated team of people around me that really took to the information that I was able to give to them, and we implemented a lot of really good practices that allowed us to launch new products in that state. And I was able to bring those team building aspects as well as some of the extraction techniques to VIBE here.
How do you build a good team in the lab?
A lot of it comes down to people wanting to be there. So you need to find, a really good team of people that are very passionate about cannabis, just as passionate, if not more passionate than myself about it. I like to see, people who have taken the initiative themselves, whether they're growing at home, or doing bubble hash at home and pressing it themselves. I like to see that initiative. Or if even if you just look on Reddit or Future 4200 and you start reading the forums and trying to gain the knowledge that is going to be required to get into this field.
What are some of the other avenues that people can use to gain knowledge about working in cannabis?
Well, I would say a really good place to start would be a podcast just like this one, where you're sitting down with industry people and, listening to their experience and, learning from what they can give to you. I would say that'd be a very good place to start.
So now that you're here at VIBE in Missouri, you are the lab manager. What are your duties? What are your responsibilities?
My responsibility is to keep all of the concentrates flowing through the facility and to the consumer. So that starts with taking in the fresh frozen inventory. And I need to know what's there, what's available to run. That could range anything from terpene profiles to trichome head sizes, to if we pulled it a couple days early or a week early, or if something happened and needed to go a little bit late, I can make all sorts of adjustments for that in the extraction lab, given my position. That's just the beginning though. It can range from changing up processes, to temperatures. I have say over some of the naming as well that we do. So my scope is rather large here at VIBE.
How often do you have to tweak the machinery? If it's constantly being in use, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of temperature changes. Is that you?
Yes. So I take a lot of the processes that I've built over the past couple of years and retrofit them to work with what we're doing here as efficiently as we can.
How do you know when to make those changes, though?
A lot of it is experimentation. So, you have to have a very drawn out and well-planned form to do those experiments. You need to have good controls, and, you need to limit your variables.
Well, let's talk about the extraction method that you were using down at VIBE. What would that be?
That would be solventless extraction.
Love it. No school like the old school. Hash, tell me about it.
So currently down here, we're running an Osprey. It runs about 15,000 to 20,000 grams per wash. We could pull off 2,000 to 3,000 grams of wet hash. It'll dry up. It'll vary dependent upon the strain. But yeah, that's our main form of extraction right now, is just solventless, so just ice and water.
Ice and water. And you've got what kind of equipment to do the work for you? Because I don't imagine it's someone with a stick.
No, we don't do it the old school way. We have a Osprey washer. It's a impeller washer, so it moves the water as opposed to having like an actual paddle in there spinning it itself. It's a little bit more efficient, and it allows us to not beat up the material as much, which is nice. And then once we remove it from the Osprey, we have 4 harvest-dried freeze dryers, and we're looking to expand that as well. So they go through the freeze drying process, and then we press it on a pure pressure rosin press.
So, Joe, if you would, I would like you to take us through how you make hash at VIBE.
So that's going to start in the harvest. So whenever you harvest your plants, you're going to want to remove any excess oxygen as well as keep them very cold. So however you want to go about doing that, you're more than welcome to figure that out. But it needs to be cold and devoid of oxygen so you don't oxidize your trichome heads, which is going to affect the color of your hash.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get your fresh frozen material, you're going to want to let it get solidly frozen. So I would say at least 24 to 48 hours. And then you're going to load that into your machine. Once you load it into your machine, there's going to be preset cycles that are going to be on there for my extractors that I've placed in there. They're basically going to hit go. And then there's going to be a little buzzer at the end of the time, and it's going to set them off an internal timer that's going to say, hey, you need to wait a few minutes, and then dump the hash.
But it's going to look like a washing machine going around and around and around.
Exactly. Whenever you get it going, it's going to look like a washing machine, exactly that.
And then when it comes out the spigot, and then it gets dumped into this big bucket where you've got bags that have different microns in it.
Exactly. And a system that I really enjoy about the Osprey is the nest. The nest is something that I haven't really seen with other hash washers before. It allows you to dump that already chilled water, filter the trichome heads out, as well as any excess plant material or undesirables, and then you can recirculate that water, which is already chilled, back into the vessel to be reused again. So not only do you cut down on a lot of wastewater, you also save yourself time by not having to cool down more water, as well as add more ice to achieve that temperature.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes out of the spigot and you strain all the water out of the bag, what are you left with?
Now you're left with bubble hash, very wet bubble hash. So it's going to have anywhere from 50 to 90% water in there. Depending upon your agitation levels will depend on how much you extract and how much of that is undesirables. So once you get your wet bubble hash, you're going to stick it into the freeze dryer. Depending upon your moisture level will depend on how long it goes for. We run a cycle about 20 to 30 hours, depending upon, the moisture content of the hash.
And then after 20 to 30 hours, what do you do with the slabs of hash?
We take them out. If they look really good, we might take a couple pictures, and then we'll take them, weigh them up, and stick them into bags to be pressed.
Okay, so let's go to the pressing room then. So you've got this big slab of hash. What do you press it in?
We have a Pikes Peak, I believe is what it's called, the rosin press from Pure Pressure.
And you put this directly into the press, and then it's what, temperature and pressure that determines the quality of the product you get?
Not necessarily. The quality of the product is going to majority of the time be determined by the flower going in. So the way I like to look at extraction, and this is what I tell all of my new extractors that I bring onto the team, you have to look at extraction regardless of the form like an equation. You're substituting variables. So the machine itself will run the equation for you. But if you substitute in a poor input, you can't expect to get a good output. And that's just the way I like to explain it to people.
So if you put poor plant quality in, you're going to get poor hash out.
Correct.
how much say do you have in the plant material that is used for your rosins?
I have a lot to say. We only send the finest flower to rosin because it requires the highest quality product.
Do you get to choose genetics?
No, unfortunately not. Thankfully here, though, I don't really need to choose genetics because a lot of our cultivars are just superb already, in my opinion at least.
What are some of your cultivars that you make really good hash with?
I would say Chem Reserve and Gelato are probably our top two. I know Gelato was nominated for Best Concentrate, I believe. So personally, that's one of my favorite gelatos I've ever had, actually. It's got a very fruity grape flavor to it. Whenever I smoke flower or hash, I do enjoy the fruity terps myself. So that's one of my personal go-tos. But I would say selling-wise as well as production-wise, the Chem Reserve and the Gelato have been our best.
What's your favorite form of consumption?
So I really only smoke flower. I'm mainly a flower smoker because I do like to achieve that full spectrum of terpenes. I understand, there are some drawbacks to that as well, but I really find that the difference in highs that you can get, and because of those terpenes, really come through more so on the flower. Solventless is good for extraction. Whenever you go full melt, I would say would be the best form. It's going to capture the most terpenes as well as, the most THC.
All right. We are going to pivot back to Colorado for a second here, because I found a study in 2020 from Colorado University in Boulder, where they studied regular users of cannabis, and they found high-potency concentrates boosted blood levels of THC to levels twice as high as smoking conventional weed, but it didn't necessarily get people higher. And then they started talking about potency caps being discussed in the Colorado legislature. I don't think it went anywhere, but as the laws in Missouri here continue to evolve, do you see a cap on potency levels and concentrates in the future?
I would hope not. I would hope that we're able to bring the knowledge to the legislature to explain to them that that's not really the way that process works. You want to grow the plant to its, best that it can be. And so to restrict that to a THC cap is just not beneficial for anybody, really. And I understand the purpose of it, but there are better ways to achieve that.
So through education,
exactly.
Warning labels?
I would say through education, a lot of education. We really need to express, how much these high potency concentrates affect people. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all, but you just need to know what you're getting into.
Well, let's say you're a bud tender and I'm someone, and I come in and say, give me the highest THC percentage concentrate you got. What would you tell me?
I would look back at them and I would say, okay, I could do that for you, but I'm guessing you like flavor. If you're going for the effects, sure. But if you want the effects to be complemented, you need a good terpene profile with it as well. And that's where you really experience those, ecstatic, effects, or, the couch slumps. That's where you get that sort of spectrum, is from the terpenes, as opposed to just consuming a high potency THC.
Do you think there's a way that someone who's been walking the planet a lot longer than both of us have been, who only really cares about high THC percentages, do you think there's a way to gently convince them otherwise if they don't want to necessarily talk terps?
Yeah, we need to, terpenes and things like that, especially the different chemical names, can kind of scare people from what I've seen. So if we kind of, I don't want to say dumb it down because that's not really the best way to say it, but if you make it simpler for people to understand and say, hey, this is going to give you the effects that you're looking for, but it's also, going to taste like lemons. And the lemon taste might complement, your THC.
What products are coming out of the VIBE labs? Do you guys focus solely on rosin and solventless production?
Yeah, so currently we're mainly focused on that. We produce a lot of just, we call it hard rosin, just live rosin inside of jars. And then we produce quite a bit of live rosin cartridges as well.
Can you make the same thing with rosin that you can with resin, butters, batters, shatters, waxes?
Yeah, absolutely. Here in the near future, we'd like to see production of that begin.
So how can you assure the quality of the products that you are making at VIBE?
So I myself will go through every hard rosin gram, actually open the lid and look at it myself. If I see any sort of inconsistencies, I'll send it back to our packaging team and say, hey, this needs to be fixed. This doesn't look right,
Every jar?
every single jar.
How many jars do you look at in the course of a day?
Today we processed about 250.
That's a lot of eyeball time on jars.
You would think so, but really not. We get them in trays of 50. So, I will get a tray of 50 that winds up on one of my workstations, and then I'll take 10 minutes, go through, open the jar, look at it. If there's something in there, I can dig it out with a dabber, or send it back and,
What's something you might find?
So we receive our jars on pallets. Occasionally there'll be, small things like that, like dust particles and things like that come in because the pallets aren't completely sealed.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through, we blow out all of our jars, and then we wipe them down as well before we start the gramming process. But, occasionally things can slip through.
Okay. You said you are more a flower smoker than a concentrate smoker. How would you describe the differences in feeling between smoking flower and concentrates?
So I was a concentrate-only smoker for a very long time. I would say the entirety of my time that I lived in Colorado, and prior to that growing up in Florida, I was strictly an oil smoker. I grew up on chatter. I loved it. Live resin became a thing, and I just fell in love, and that's part of the reason why I'm here, is because I've enjoyed it so much. But I would say that solvents restrict your pull of terpenes. So whenever you get into hydrocarbons, you get a lot of the terpenes, but you don't get all of them. That's why, in my opinion, if I'm going to smoke a concentrate, it's going to be full melt double hash.
So what kind of new products do you guys have coming out of the lab in the future?
In the next 6 to 8 months, I would like to see a plethora of new strains coming down. We are doing quite a bit of pheno hunting right now, and we have more strains than I can name off the top of my head. So once we get those figured out and I get to see them closer to the end of flower and figure out which ones are going to wash well and which ones won't, then we're going to be able to start to process those and maybe mix those in with some other strains like we've done previously, to create a nice new mix for people.
Are there certain strains out there that are bred simply to be washed?
Not at our facility. Not to my knowledge.
But out there in the world there are, maybe?
I have heard that Baker's Dozen supposedly was bred to be washed for hash. We have Baker's Dozen. I do really like Baker's Dozen. It's not my favorite hash. Like I said, the gelato and the Kent Reserve are my favorite. But everybody, has their own opinions.
That's going to do it for another episode of The Fields. I'd like to thank our guest, Joe Kelly, the lab manager for VIBE Cannabis here in St. Louis. And I'd like to thank all of you out there for watching and listening. My name is Jeff Rouse. We'll see you next time.